Hey, so welcome to another personal tax revision session. As I think most of you are aware, last week was Rebecca's last session, so I am now going to take over. So I'm just checking people on mute as they come in. I teach mostly in our Cambridge and our Norwich offices. I'm a chartered accountant and chartered tax advisor, so I quite like the tax stuff. One of my favourite subjects. I'm hoping that it's going to be your favourite subject as well. So what we're going to have a look at tonight is the written. No, we haven't done the written yet. More people just checking. Just check you're on mute as you come in. If you've got any questions, just pop them into the chat box. There's another one there. Okay. Good evening. Yeah, so we're going to have a look at the written question, task 1, and depending on time, I did send out a task 1 and a task 5 question. I would just pop those into the chat box now, so they have been sent out in advance. I did actually email them out at lunchtime today in case anybody was newly registered, but just let me pop those into the chat box now in case anybody hasn't got them. So task 1. Some of you are not on mute, just check as you come in. I'm trying to catch everybody, but as the group increases, that's harder to do. There we go, there's another one. Okay, so if you haven't already had the email, those tasks are sitting in the box there. Rebecca told me that you like a Menti quiz, so I thought that we would start with Menti quiz again. So let me just move to that. So we've got 26 on. Let's see how many, as I'm sure you're aware, if you don't have a spare device to do the quiz on, you can do it on the screen that you're watching on. Or if you'd rather just follow it on the screen, that's fine as well.
Yeah.
Good evening as you're joining. I'm just going to start with Menti quiz. Just give everybody a little bit of time to log in. Just 5 questions to see how much you can remember from task 1 things. Good evening as you're joining. If you don't recognise the voice, my name's Carol. I'm taking over from Rebecca for the next few sessions. And just let you know, we are recording as usual, so we can put this on YouTube and also send you the link for the recording and for people that aren't able to actually attend tonight. I've got 18 on the Menti. I'll just give you another minute or so to join. Anybody who's not logging in to play, you can follow on the screen. You can answer the questions in the chat box if you'd like to. You need anything sent again? Is that the task 5 one that you'd like? Just send both of those again. I know that if you get kicked out, you do lose all the chat. Okay. Right, I think we might make a start on the quiz. Are you ready? Countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Those of you that are just joining us, just starting with the Menti quiz, you can probably still join in. Not very long to answer some of these. Oh, well done. Yes, tax evasion. So remember, tax planning is absolutely fine. That's the one that the government wants us to do. So things such as ISAs, where they give us tax reliefs, things like encourage you to save into your pension. That's where they want you to, they want you to save, they want you to put into a pension, so they give you tax relief for doing it. Tax avoidance is legal, but it's kind of in that grey area. You're not using the law the way it was intended, and sometimes tax avoidance schemes can be shut down, but they are not illegal. It is the tax evasion where we are trying, really trying to avoid paying tax, perhaps by hiding sources of income. Okay, let's see how the leaderboard is. It's not moving on to the next slide. Somebody's not on mute. Let me check that again for you. There we go. Another couple as we come in. Well done, Scott. Very close at the top, though. Okay, next one. Yes, you've got to be careful with the money laundering. Who should we report the money laundering to? That's it. So if you work in a practice, then you will tell your money laundering reporting officer. It will then be up to them to decide if a report needs to be made to the National Crime Agency. If you just work for yourself, if you're a sole trader, then you go straight to the NCA. You don't tell HMRC. You will tell HMRC if you're going to resign, so you're not going to act, or you just tell them you're not going to act for the clients anymore. That doesn't necessarily mean they'll immediately think something dodgy is going on, because there's many reasons why your client may decide to part with you or vice versa, which doesn't mean that there's actually any money laundering going on. But you don't tell HMRC, you tell the NCA through your money laundering reporting officer. Leaderboard. Oh, a bit of a change, I think. Oh, we have a new leader at the top. Lydia's on the top at the moment. Next question. Oh, it was a bit closer that time, wasn't it? Yes, we have this thing in tax. There is no such thing as materiality in tax. All tax errors should be reported. We do have this thing that if they're trivial, you can ignore them, but trivial does mean, very small. It's a very different thing from materiality, which we have in accounting, where materiality can be judged by the size of a company. So if you're looking at a big company like Tesco's and they'd forgotten to record the fact that they bought 3 new computers this year, that would not be material. If you had a small corner shop and they hadn't recorded that they hadn't bought 3 computers this year, then for them that could be material. That's from an accounts point of view, but for tax you can't ignore any of that. It's got to be included. So false was the correct answer there. We cannot ignore them. Lydia holding on. Next one. A little bit of revision of your ethical principles.
Integrity.
Oh, well done. You know your principles. Yes, integrity is being straightforward and honest. No change at the top. Okay, last question, I think. Yes, so they do like you to have a little bit of an understanding of different tax structures. And so taxes can sometimes they increase as your income goes up, sometimes it might stay the same, sometimes the tax you pay can actually decrease. Can you give an example of a progressive tax in the UK? Yeah, that's right. So income tax pay as you earn. So pay as you earn is the way to collect the income tax. So as you all know, for personal tax, that up to 37,500, you'll pay 20%. And then as a higher rate taxpayer, you pay 40%. And then as an additional rate taxpayer, if you earn more than 150,000, you'll be paying tax at 45. Natasha's mentioned the CGT. Yeah, that's another one. So we've got the 10% rate and the 20% rate. What about a regressive tax? Oh, Scott was waiting for that one. Yes, national insurance. So as an employee, you're going to be paying 12%, and then it drops to what percentage once you get over a certain amount? Yeah, it drops down to 2%. So when you earn a lot more money, you don't pay nowhere near as much national insurance. It kind of balances up because you pay more income tax and less national insurance. Okay, I think this is the final leaderboard. Oh, yeah, that was closely fought. Well done, Ted. Would Ted like to own up to who they are and take full credit for coming top of the table? Maybe not. Okay, well done. Okay, let's have a look at the question that we're going to look at tonight. So the first task that we're going to have a look at is task 1. I'm just going to turn my screen around so it will all go upside down for a moment. Okay, and I'll just make that bigger so you can see that. That's better. Okay. Okay, so you were sent a task to have a look at before this session. So it's the first question on your paper. It is the only written question in personal tax. So the tax units are a bit kinder. As you know, you have a lot of written work to do at level 4, and that can be up to 50 or 60% written when you get to the synoptic, but around 10% in the tax unit. So this is task 1, as we said. This is worth 10 marks. Which is 10% of the marks. You got 100 marks and you've got 2.5 hours, so that would give you 15 minutes. Now, it is a written question. It's the first one on the paper, so you're a little bit nervous when you first start, perhaps. What sort of pass rate do you think you get on this question? If you took the global results, how many people do you think actually get 70% on this question? Probably not very much. That's rather unoptimistic. 15%. You can go higher than 15. It's not that bad. It's between those two. You're getting there. Let me put this up and show you. So these coloured lines can be a little bit difficult to see, but what we're looking at is that line there. So about 33%, Alex is right on there. Spot on. Yeah, about 33% past task 1. You can actually see it's not the worst answered. Task 3 is the worst answered, which is looking at benefits. So not the car benefits. Car benefits is task 2. Everybody loves that one. But task 3, where they could ask you about accommodation and loans and use of assets. There's a lot of different things that can go on there. So obviously we will come on to that in later weeks, and you may already have attended a session on that. So remember, these are global averages. So some people do a lot better. I'm going to actually show you what the examiner has said before we have a look at this task, so we can take the examiner's comments into consideration. You can access this document. If you've never looked at the examiner reports, I would highly recommend them. They're available just in the normal study portal. If you go into your personal tax section, you'll be able to see the examiner's report, and they come out once a year, and they will tell you how students performed, they will tell you what students are good at, and also what they're not so good at, and they will then give you tips on, this is what you can do to improve. So they're really useful to look at when you start getting onto your revision phase. So obviously we don't want to go through everything, but let's just try and pick out a few key points here. It says it would appear students have been question spotting and not covering the whole assessment criteria. So this probably means that students perhaps look at the questions that are in the AAT practice assessments and think, right, it's going to be on that. I'll make sure I know how to answer those too. But it could be quite a bit wider. I'll talk in a moment about the types of areas that could come up in this. It did actually drop quite significantly in sort of over the last year. What about this? This is not going to be you. A minority of students are not answering this task at all. Now, clearly, if you don't write anything down, you can't get any marks. If you write something, you're going to get some marks, so you definitely got to have a go at it. I wonder if that is perhaps people leaving it until the end, thinking it's the written, I'll do it last, perhaps running out of time, don't know. Remember, you don't have to do these tasks in the order they're set. So if you don't like written, questions, when's the best time to do it, do you think? So we have some differences of opinion then, that's absolutely fine. Second, okay, I like all those answers. Scott is do as I say, not as I do. Yeah, I think that's perhaps a good technique. Maybe do it first. Then it's done. Then you can focus on the rest of the paper. But if you really don't want to start with the written, start with a task that you do like, perhaps the car benefit one, start with task 2, and then come back to it when you've had a chance to just relax into the exam a bit. If you're going to leave it until the end, just make sure you've still got enough time to do it, because this is the other thing, that people take longer than 15 minutes, taking 1/3 longer than the notional time allocated. That's pretty normal with written questions to take longer. You will find that on some of the other questions you'll do them quicker, so it does balance out. But if you start this question at the end when you've got 10 minutes left and you know it's going to take 15, you're immediately going to be panicking and you won't do so well on it. So Matthew said perhaps jot some notes down, have a bit of a look at it, then you can start to have a think about it. Yes, you could come back to it later. So everybody's different. Whatever you do, make sure if you don't do the questions in order that you do go back. You can flag them, so remember to go back, don't miss questions accidentally. So they do actually say that taking longer is a strength. Why not? Do a bit of planning. That students know the difference between planning, avoidance and evasion. They know what a tax practitioner should do, and they're also using the information provided in the tax tables. Remember, the tax tables are your friend. You need to know them really, really well, particularly for the written question. So where is it going wrong? A lack of planning. Don't feel you've got to dive in and start writing straight away. I was terrible. I always wanted to dive in and start writing straight away. But taking a minute or two to plan it, to think about the different paragraphs, ensure that you cover all the points, that's going to be really useful. The worst thing you can do is to perhaps write a beautiful answer, but only answer half the question. If you've only answered half the question, you can only get half the marks. A lack of knowledge of the objectives and functions of taxation and residence and domicile. Now, residence and domicile may not be your favourite topics. Do remember that you have things in your tax tables to help you with these. We'll talk about some of these. Actually, I'm going to write this on here. So, planning, avoidance and evasion. One of the areas that is light. This is in section 4 of your professional conduct information. So remember, you've got tax tables, and then you've got this massive sort of pages and pages of professional conduct. So section 4 in your professional conduct, you can find out about those. Roles and responsibilities comes all over the place. So that's in section 2, it's in section 3, section 5 and section 6. So there's all sorts of bits of information in there about responsibilities. Now, domicile, you've got to look somewhere different. Domicile is in the other little bit, the tax tables. And it's the very last section. Section 17, you've got a bit about deemed domicile. This is a big one across any level 4 assessment you look at. The answers, poor answers are generic. You must apply your knowledge to the scenario. Now, that's easier than it sounds. Sometimes it's just a case of, you know, repeating what's in the scenario, but what you're doing is you're then mixing the scenario with your knowledge. You're putting the two bits together. You put the two bits together, you're going to score well. What they don't want is just throw everything you know at it without actually thinking about the scenario that's been presented to you. Think of it as writing to a client. If a client wrote to you, and let's say they said, I'm thinking about, you know, taking on some employees. How would I do it? What do I need to do? If you just actually copied out what was in the HMRC guidance on how to pay people and how to deduct tax, they would sort of think, well, why have I paid you for that? I could just read that myself. It's about you personalizing it. It's about you applying it to their particular situation. So this question might not be writing to a client, but if you think about it in that way, that might help a little bit in coming up with that scenario specific answer. This is important as well, appreciating the marks available. So if it's worth 8 marks and you just put 2 or 3 lines down, you're only going to have 2 to 3 marks. So roughly you can say probably you're aiming for sort of 1 mark per sentence. It's a bit of a rough guide, but it does help quite a bit. And again, if you've got 15 minutes and you spend 5 minutes on this question, you know that even if you write the most concise answer anybody's ever written, 5 minutes on a 15-minute question is not going to do it. You're only going to end up with 2 or 3 marks. So finally, so read it in detail. Obviously, do read the question, pick up all the clues, read it nice and slowly. Have a little plan, jot down some ideas of what you want to talk about. Make sure you don't question spot, that you're ready for anything across the topics that could come up. There is detail in your answers and the points you make are developed. There you go, it's that easy. That's what the examiner said. Let's have a look at a question. Okay, so this is the one that I gave you to look at. So do pick up the clues on who you are. What is your role in this question? So you work for an accountancy firm. You discovered by chance that the client received bank interest. So we want to make sure we refer to bank interest in our answer from an investment account that you were unaware of. This income had not been included within the latest tax return. So that's the scenario. And then the requirement. It's often worth reading the requirement first, but it's quite short on this one. In the box below, detail the actions. A clue there straight away. More than one thing that you should take in respect of this irregularity. So it's about what you should do relating to this irregularity. So there's 3 sentences there, but there is quite a lot you need to think about as you're reading through. Now, the biggest error that I think people make, now they like to have proper sentences because it is a professional reply, but if you would rather do bullet point, bullet points is going to be better than not putting something down. So what I would say when you're practicing these questions is try bullet points to start with, and then perhaps see if you can develop it a bit more. It's difficult to say for sure because sometimes bullet points will work, but have a go at sort of developing them a bit more where you can. Now, the biggest error that people often make with this sort of question is kind of just jumping in with both feet straight away. Oh my goodness, you've broken the law, you're going to go to jail, I can't work for you anymore. Don't do that. You've got to take a step back. You've got to, take this step by step. So don't jump to conclusions. Where can you go to get the information to answer this question? Yeah, we're going to talk to the client first. But before I start writing down what I'm going to do, particularly for task 1, what should I be thinking about looking at before I start writing? I've looked at the question, I know what the requirements are, what do I want to look at next? I've got something else, that's it, the reference material. So I'm going to go to the reference material. Now remember that this will all come up on the screen. So I'm just laughing at Natasha. She says the tree. That's business tax, Natasha, when you get the tree. Okay, so remember yes, there's a flow chart. When you look at this in the AAT assessment, you're not going to have to flip through pages and pages and pages. You can't take this document into the assessment with you. It will all just come up on the screen. And it will be a little menu, so you can go straight to the bit you want. So as I look through the contents, because you're going to get something like this on the page, section 5, dealing with errors. That's what we want. Sorry, it went straight to it. So section 5, you've got lots of narrative here, and then there's a sheet, and that's what you want. The flow chart gives you a nice summary of what to do. So hopefully you've seen this before. So as you know, this reference material is really big. You've got 17 pages of information, but if you know what's in that before the assessment, then it's going to really help you, because you'll sit there and you'll look at the question and go, oh yes, there's something about that in the reference material. Now, clearly you're not going to get 10 marks just for copying the reference material. Again, it's about the application, but it's going to get you quite a long way through the question. And if you don't use the reference material, you could be missing out on very easy marks. So, if there's 2 marks that you could get straight from the reference material and you've missed them, that's 20%, that's quite a lot that we want to get going on. So somebody said we should talk to the client. Brilliant, because that's the first bit. Establish the facts. So let's start writing this answer down. Just go back to that again. Okay, so first, identify the facts. And as you said, in this situation, that is likely to mean discuss with the client. Because we don't know why they didn't include it. It might have just been an oversight, they might have forgotten, and we don't know much about it. All we know at the moment is it's some bank interest. So what else would we want to know about it? That's it, yes, we'd want to know how much. Okay. So we probably want to ask, when was the account opened? Because it might affect more than 1 year. How much was the interest? That's it, that's the next step. Okay. So you can see straight away, if I'd have just written identify the facts, I've got very little in terms of marks. I've just copied that from the reference material. But if I then said, right, we need to talk to the client, find out when this account was opened, how much interest did they get, you've applied it to the scenario, then you've got the good marks. Yeah, so we're saying that, you know, we work for a firm of accountants, we're preparing a tax return for our clients, and they've got this investment account, so that just means that they're actually going to get some interest. So step 2, you've already told me, so talk to the client, let's find out about it. So again, it's in your reference material. Step 2 says, is it trivial? Now, you can't really put a number on it, but you're probably looking at below £200 for something to be trivial, which is why I said materiality doesn't really come into it. You've got to report all tax errors. But we would certainly put that in our answer. So second, consider if the amounts are trivial. And make the point that we've just said, the accounting concept of materiality does not apply to tax returns. So it's very unlikely that an error would be trivial, and so I think we can put that as well. So it is unlikely the error would be trivial. Yeah, we don't know what the amount is, but it would be quite a short question if we decided to stop there and not go through the rest of the steps. What should we do next? So we found out more information, found out we have got this account, that they have got some interest, which hasn't been declared. What do you think we should do next? Yes, so we then need to talk to the client, advise the client in writing. That's right. Of the need to disclose the bank interest. And you can see we're doing it again. Just by putting in the word bank interest, we're applying it to the scenario. What else should you tell them about when you're telling them we need to disclose this? That's right. Tell them of what will happen if they don't. Okay. Advise. Penalties. May be charged, but these could be significantly higher if HMRC later discover the error. Just check somebody's not on mute. See if I can find it. There we go, I've got it. And you probably don't want to get too heavy, but you might want to tell them that this would be considered as fraud. Because what you don't want is to say, oh yeah, don't worry about it, it's only a little bit. You know, you need to make them aware that it is an important issue. So you talk to the client, you've explained the situation to them. The client could then do one or two things. What might be your client's response? Yes, they might refuse. No, don't worry about it, it's only a small amount. What should you do next? Yeah, we'll need to tell our money laundering reporting officer. Other things that we need to do. Yeah, tell them we're going to stop acting for them. One other thing. You're going to tell the client you're going to stop acting for them and tell HMRC. And this is all in that reference material. So if your client refuses to declare the income, you can't just do it, not unless your letter of engagement already gives you authority. You can't just go ahead and tell HMRC. So you can't act for the client any longer. So this might be a good place where you could do some bullet points. The model answer has sentences, but I think bullet points would work equally well here. So first of all, resign. We should resign from the appointment. As you said, we need to tell HMRC. That you have ceased to act, but don't tell them why. Yes, you would need to tell the client in writing. And as you said, we would also need to consider if a report should be made to our firm's money laundering reporting officer. I'll just go back to the reference material in a moment just to show you how much of that answer that you could actually get from that. There is one more thing in the reference material as well, which I'm going to add on in a moment. I think money laundering reporting officer would be okay. I wouldn't use too many abbreviations. Certainly, if it does depend on who you're writing to. So if you're writing to a client, you probably wouldn't be writing to a client about the money laundering reporting officer, but generally when you're writing to a client, do not use abbreviations because they won't know what they are. But I think that sort of one would be okay. If you're in doubt, write out in full. I'll come back to this because I know you might still be writing. So I'll just go to the reference material again for a moment. You might do, that's not specifically mentioned in the flow chart. Let's see what else we've got in here. It does go into a bit more detail here. It says that you could, if you don't have automatic authorization, that you could perhaps give oral advice but then written. I think it's fine to go straight to the written advice, but there is a bit more detail in there that you could put in. And then, as we said, if the client will not give permission, so we said advise the client in writing, tell HMRC. They also said in here you might need to tell advise HMRC whether any accounts or statements you've already submitted to them should not be relied on. We talked about a money laundering report, and the final bit there is consider your response to any professional inquiry letter. Now that's a bit of a difficult area, not expected to know anything about that, but if you resign, then your client is going to go and find another accountant, and it's quite normal for them to ask you questions before they accept the appointment, so you'd have to consider that carefully, and that might be perhaps where you'd want to seek legal advice on what you could actually tell the incoming accountant. And so, yeah, we've got the money laundering bit in there. So unfortunately, I can't guarantee that you will get this question. As you know, there could be a range of questions, but there is lots of good stuff to help you in the reference material. Put the reference material together with the scenario. So you can find this on the AAT website. When you do the assessment, it will be on the screen, but if you haven't already been given that reference material, if you go to the study support area on the learning portal, look at personal tax, you'll be able to find it on the AAT website as well. So it's in two parts. You have this sort of 17-page document with information that's specifically for task 1, and then you have a much shorter document called the tax tables, and that will have things such as the income tax rates, the personal allowance, the car benefit, all those little things that you'll need to do the other tasks. That's all available. So we'll just pop that last bit about considering any professional inquiry letters on the bottom. So I'm just going to add that on the bottom there. So consider the response to a subsequent professional inquiry letter from a new tax advisor. I will send out my scribbles, but also a printed model answer. But if you've got that down, I'd like to talk about some general points for answering task 1 as well. Yeah, I'll go to another bit of paper. not necessarily continuous. So I think we've probably done that because of that first bit, that we've identified the facts. You know, we've identified, yes, we have missed some income. We told the client about it. Most clients at that stage hopefully would say, yeah, that's fine, I understand, and so you would go ahead and disclose. I'm not quite sure what your question is, Alex, relevant to the question. It is likely that the accountant would need to charge some additional fees. Yeah, so assuming that your client says, yes, you know, I would like to disclose, then, you know, yes, your accountant is likely to charge additional fees because they're going to need to write a letter, they're going to need to explain the circumstances behind that. And that's the thing, it might have been, you know, a complete mistake, you know, they just didn't realise or just forgot about it. But either way, we want to be able to disclose and explain what happened. Okay, let's talk about some general points for answering task 1. And so we talked about these, but let's put them down. So general task 1 tips. Okay, so most importantly, as the examiner said, use the scenario. Apply your knowledge to the scenario. Generic answers will score low marks. And by generic, we mean just sort of, if you just copied the flow chart out without actually applying it, you get very, very few marks for that. Read the question carefully. Have you answered all the requirements? Now, it is reasonably straightforward in this question, but sometimes you'll get a sentence and it says, identify this and explain that. And it's so common to just miss the and bit and only answer half the question. So make sure you've answered the whole question. The examiner mentioned looking at the marks. So roughly aim for 1 sentence per mark. Now also put yourself in the mind of the person who is marking your script. When they look at your answer, is it going to be just one big lump of text and they stare at it and think, oh, I'm going to have to read that really carefully, it's all in there somewhere? Or are you going to have lots of short sentences, lots of short paragraphs, lots of white space, so it's very easy to go, yeah, they've got that point, tick. Yeah, they've got that point, tick. Make your examiner smile when they're marking it. Make it a beautiful thing to answer, to mark. So that's my next thing. Lots of white space. Between paragraphs. Remember, the box that you type into just keeps getting bigger and bigger. So you don't have to try and squash it up into a small area. Short paragraphs. Finally, plan. Don't rush into writing. You will have a better, more efficient answer if you step back from it and just think about it for a minute or two. And use the reference material. Anybody have any other tips for task 1? There is something else I should put on here. Practice. The more written questions you do, the more confident you'll get doing them. But you've got to practice just like any other question. So as I suspected, task 1, yes, spelling and grammar is an interesting one. You won't get penalised. Obviously, it's nice to make it look professional, but you are not penalised for your spelling or your grammar. It obviously must be understandable. So task 1, as I suspected, has taken up all of the session, which is fine. The other question, task 5, we'll save that for next time. So next week we will have a look at a task 5 and a task 4 question. So I will send out a task 4 question and send out the task 5 one again to do for later on. So I shall stop recording there now and just stay on for a few more minutes for any final questions.